Get inside. Get what we need.
And this is this week's Closet Classic.
Nostalgia. I mean, who doesn't like nostalgia? I was born in the mid-'50s. I didn't have a chance to really experience radio, and even the early days of television. I missed that as well. I got more into the era of Andy Griffith and Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
And I know one of your favorite shows is All in the Family.
My all-time favorite.
That's your all-time favorite. Yeah.
Loved it. I've seen the reruns 100 times, and I laugh each and every time I see it.
It was great. Well, how do you compare television now to back then?
I don't like television now. And I think with cable, where you have so many more channels, that just means there's a lot more junk on. And I watch very, very little television as compared to, 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Sure. Sure, and everything these days is reality shows. And
well, see, I know they do well in the ratings, Rich,
right,
but
they do, but
it's not my bag. I just don't enjoy them, and I find them boring.
Right, and thank God for shows like TV Land and
yeah, TV Land is great. Nick at Night, Nickelodeon.
Night, we get to see those things again. I mean, I love the Honeymooners, and I mean,
see, an old television show like the Honeymooners is like a fine wine. It just holds up beautifully, and 100 years from now, they'll still laugh at the Honeymooners.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to Turntable. I'm Richie Sarno, and I'm here with radio personality Mel Simons, and we're at the Burlington Public Library, where in about an hour from now, you're going to be presenting one of your many shows.
Yep.
Tonight is the golden days of rock and roll.
Golden days of rock and roll. When rock and roll was fun. That's the best way I describe it. I don't find today's rock music fun, at least not for me. I'm sure it's a generation gap. Mm-hmm. But I love the oldies. And even our WBZ sister station, 103, where they play oldies, has very, very good ratings.
Yes, yes.
So there's definitely an audience for the oldies.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's at least 3 or 4 stations that cover the oldies.
Exactly,
yeah,
sure.
And how many times do you go to oldies concert? I wish there was a different name in saying oldies concert. Yeah.
I can't think of a better name, but
yeah.
I guess the word oldies, I mean, when you talk of oldies with the rock concerts, it's basically 50s and 60s.
Right.
We went to one last summer and saw Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons.
Love Frankie Valli
and
the Four
they
Seasons,
were great. And
yeah.
his show is one of the hottest shows on Broadway, Jersey Boys.
That's right. Yeah,
and
I'm waiting for that to come around to the Boston.
It will come to Boston.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they do have a traveling company which is doing very well, and it's a sellout every night on Broadway. So I have heard they're going to get another traveling company, and eventually it will come to Boston.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I go to, now you're talking tonight about mostly, what, 50s music?
50s, mid-50s into the early 60s.
Into the early 60s.
I opened with Bill Haley and the Comets. I closed with the Beatles' appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, and about 26, 27 great rock stars between those two.
Yeah, well, that's a lot, yeah.
Yeah,
I was
really
just at Mohegan Sun a few months ago and saw the Grassroots, but they were like 67.
70s, I think, mostly Grassroots.
60,
they were
yeah,
very,
yeah.
very... Were they alone, or was there another act with them?
No, they were the only ones. They were at the Wolf's Den.
Yeah,
With the free concert and stuff, and I've been down there before to see other performers.
I have too. It's a good
Chubby
place.
Checker was just down there recently.
We saw Chubby Checker last year at the Topsfield Fair, and got to meet him afterwards. You know, the interesting thing I love about Chubby Checker, of course, he had the #1 selling record of 1960 with The Twist. And before The Twist came in, when disc jockeys were playing rock records, couples basically did a Lindy. They did a jitterbug.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Jitterbug Lindy. Then when Chubby Checker introduced The Twist, people stopped touching. They started doing the twist, and then came just the shaking. That was the evolution of dancing to rock and roll music.
Well, an interesting thing about the twist, that you should mention that, my friend Little Joe Cook, who had a hit in 1957 called Peanuts, he was offered the song The Twist by the Nightingales, a gospel group. And he wasn't allowed to sing it on his record company because it was too suggestive. Right, yeah, the up and down, round and round.
Oh, my goodness.
So it ended up in the hands of Hank Ballard and the Midnighters,
yeah,
who actually copyrighted it. Then it went to Chubby Checker.
And Chubby Checker had one of the biggest hits of the 1960s.
Yes, yeah.
A major, major hit.
Yeah. So before we go talking about some of your other shows and stuff, you've been on radio for what, a good part of 30?
I've been on BZ for 28 years.
28, almost 30 years, yeah.
I started with Larry Glick, did one show on Old Time Radio, and Larry said at the end of the show, I want you to be a regular. And I stayed with Larry Glick for 14 years. And it was a great 14 years. And then he retired, and I figured that was it. And the gentleman by the name of Bob Raleigh, who lives in Burlington, who will be here tonight at the show, he called me and he said, people are asking for you. Let's do one show and see what happens. And so I did one show with Bob Raleigh, and at the end of the show, he said, I want you on every week. And I stayed with him for 6 years. And then he retired. And the gentleman that replaced him was Steve Lavelli. And Steve called me and said, let's do a show. We'll see what happens. And I did one show with Steve, and I'm starting my 9th year with him now.
Oh, great.
And what I do on radio is very different. I call it trivia without the questions. Most trivia shows, the person will ask a question, and the home audience look how I'm dating myself, punches in the telephone, and they call up and give the answer. What I do, Rich, is I play voices. For example, I may open with Perry Como or Frank Sinatra, which is easy, and the people phone up and say, oh, it's Perry Como or Frank Sinatra. Then I'll play a TV theme, a movie theme. I'll play an old singing jingle, the actual jingle, and I buzz out the name of the product. So it comes out like this, for example. You'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with, and I buzz out.
Pepsodent.
Pepsodent, exactly. And then we get into what is called the toughies. I will play people singing that aren't known as singers. I may play Katharine Hepburn singing, Gary Cooper singing, and I get all this from old radio shows or old movies. Sherlock Holmes, Basil Rathbone singing. Yeah, and we give prizes for the toughies. And so that's basically what I've been doing the past 28 years on WBZ.
Now, what did you do prior to being
I'm an entertainer. I do stand-up comedy. I'm an accordionist. And then I took a hobby. I've always wanted to do something with an audience other than entertaining. And I took a very simple hobby years ago, collecting old radio shows. I'm a big collector. I own about 165,000 radio shows. Wow. And I developed this show called The Golden Days of Radio. And I started calling all these people that had been using me as an entertainer, saying, I've got this wonderful nostalgia show, The Golden Days of Radio, and it really mushroomed for me. And then when people started to call me back, I wanted to go in a different direction, so I started doing video shows. I bought video equipment, the video projector beam, the screen, the works. And my first show was and still is The Golden Days of Television with Milton Berle and Sid Caesar and Sing Along with Mitch, shows. And then, to make a long story short, Rich, I now have 7 different video shows. I do a show called The Big Bands, where I show 14 of the great big band leaders. I do a show on Frank Sinatra called Strictly Sinatra, the whole history of Sinatra in song. My idol with comedy for years has been Jack Benny. I do a show called The World's Most Generous Cheapskate, Jack Benny. I do a show called The Big Band Singers. It's kind of a part 2 to the big bands. And then I developed this one-man show, no video on this. It's a one-man show called The Life and Songs of Al Jolson, Jimmy Durante, Eddie Cantor, and George M. Cohan. 4 gentlemen that I idolized from, years ago, vaudeville and old-time radio. Sure. So that keeps me pretty busy.
Yeah, Cohan, of course, was immortalized in the movie Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Oh, absolutely.
That great.
You know, Cohan got to see the movie shortly before he passed
Is that
away.
right?
And he was not only thrilled with the movie, which was, you know, Hollywood always changes things, but it was pretty accurate. And he was also thrilled with the way that Cagney portrayed him. And Cagney won the Academy Award for that movie, and the movie won the Academy Award as Best Movie.
Yeah, it was great.
Classic
It
movie.
was. Now, do you sing when you do that?
I sing. What I do with that show is basically three things. I play their voices. Their voices are not from record. It's all from my collection of old radio shows. I tell these delightful stories about these four performers. Then I put the accordion on, and I get the audience involved with some of their songs. So I constantly intertwine those three things: the voices, the stories, and the songs. And it's a delightful show.
An interesting instrument, the accordion. You don't see much of it these days.
I'm the last of the accordionists, Rich.
You and Myron Florin.
Me and Myron Florin. Myron passed away, unfortunately. There's no more accordionists.
Right.
Kids nowadays are playing keyboard or drums or guitar. But I always refer to myself as the last of the accordionists.
Is that a tough instrument to play?
Well, see, I play piano first.
Okay.
So the right hand was easy. You know, it's basically a piano keyboard.
Right.
The tough part was the left hand, 120 buttons, which I had to learn. I'm self-taught with the accordion, which really shows when I play, by the way, that I'm self-taught. But I have a lot of fun with it.
Now, as well as these shows that you put on, there's books that you've written.
Well,
about
that
each of the
started by
topics
accident.
there.
I've got 4 books out and about to have number 5 published. The first book was called the Old Time Radio Trivia Book. This publisher was recommended to me, and I called him, and he says, I'm not interested in a trivia book on old time radio. He says, but send it to me anyway. So I did. Bear Manor Media in Georgia, and he called me, said, I love your book. I want to do it. So he published it, and it's doing very, very well. Steve Lavelli plugs it a lot, and I sell them on my bookings, as I will later this evening. And so then I came out with Steve Lavelli wrote the foreword, as I mentioned, came out with a second book called the Old Time Television Trivia Book. And Fred Foy did the foreword. Fred Foy was the narrator on The Lone Ranger. He's the one that said, from out of the west come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver, the Lone Ranger rides again. Yeah. Wonderful voice. He did the foreword, which was wonderful. And that book has been selling well. Book number 3 came out in March. It's called Old Time Radio Memories. And what that is interviews I've done over the years with some of the great radio personalities. I interviewed the entire cast of the Jack Benny Show, the entire cast of the Fred Allen Show, Edgar Bergen, the great Gildersleeve, Rudy Valley, Fibber McGee, and Norm Crosby, the comedian, wrote the foreword for me in that book.
I hope he writes better than he speaks.
He really does. He really does write a lot better than his famous malapropisms.
Absolutely, he's terrific.
Oh, he's the best.
I look forward to every year on the Jerry Lewis telethon.
Me too.
He always stops.
He's one, and as wonderful a comedian as he is, Rich, he's a terrific person as well.
Yeah.
So book number 4 just came out just a few weeks ago, and it's called the Showbiz Trivia Book. Every aspect of show business, from movies to television, singers, comedians. Bob and Ray were a very famous comedy team, and Bob Elliott wrote the foreword in that book for me. And all 4 books, thank goodness, are doing well, which I'm very excited about. Number 5, I'm just putting the finishing touches on. It's called Old Time Television Memories, and it's interviews I've done with television personalities. Milton Berle, Steve Allen, Clayton Moore, The Lone Ranger, Maury Amsterdam, about 15 interviews. Yeah. So I'm not going to tell you who, but I'm going to ask a famous comedian to do the foreword. I don't want to mention it in case he says no.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But hopefully he'll do it.
Well, you mentioned about Bob and Ray. Of course, Bob's son, Chris Elliott, is well known to the...
Bob's son's Chris is a chip off the old block.
Yeah.
He is so funny and talented. The first time I ever saw Chris was a few years ago on the David Letterman show, where Letterman used to do shtick with him. And he is very, very funny.
Yeah.
And he's as talented as his dad is.
Yeah, and you don't see that anymore. You don't see comedy teams like we used to see on the Sullivan Show.
I can't think of one comedy team nowadays.
No, yeah.
There was Cheech and Chong. I can't think of anybody after Cheech and Chong. Oh, they were very blue, very, very off color. but there's nobody.
But the Skiles and Henderson, the Stiller and Mira, I mean...
Good. And Stiller and Mira were hysterical.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, I love them.
And Jerry Stiller's still going strong.
Yeah, and so is she. She does a lot of TV
she
work.
Does more serious stuff now.
Yeah,
too.
She's
saw on Law and Order SVU.
Absolutely,
I
saw that too. And Jerry Stiller is just delightful. You know, he was Seinfeld's. No, he was
Costanza, George's father.
George's father,
right.
And he's on some other show now, isn't he?
King of Queens.
Oh, you know your stuff, Rich. Absolutely right. Yeah.
I'm just showing my age. That's all. So the show you're doing tonight is the Golden Age of
the Golden Days of Rock and Roll. Rock and roll in its infancy. The material I get, I'm a big collector not only of old radio shows, but I'm a big collector of old television shows. So a lot of the stuff in this show are from Ed Sullivan shows, Steve Allen shows, American Bandstand, and it's all public domain. It's all public domain. So it was never copyrighted, you know, when it was
really?
on.
All those?
Who would ever think? Oh, there were so many things that were not copyrighted. The Three Stooges never got a dime for all the times their stuff was shown on television. Not a dime. Laurel and Hardy never got a dime. Abbott and Costello. Abbott died penniless.
Yeah, and that's a shame.
It really is. He should have died a millionaire from the
Absolutely.
residuals of all the times they showed Abbott and Costello stuff.
Now, I was talking to my friend Steve recently, and we were commenting about the old variety shows. And, of course, I was like 9, 10 years old when the Beatles were on Sullivan.
Sure.
I mean, and I was,
which you're going to see tonight, by the way.
Is that right?
The Beatles'
That's
first
great.
appearance at Ed Sullivan.
Is there a place these days for a variety show? I mean, would it sell?
No. Unfortunately, see, with Ed Sullivan, for example, who was on for 23 years, that's an unbelievable record, he had something for every member of the family. As I remember, for the kids, he had the clowns and the bear acts. For the teenagers, he had the current rock and roll stars like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And for the older folks, he had a lot of the old vaudevillians, people like Durante, Maurice Chevalier, Ted Lewis. But unfortunately, a variety show just wouldn't make it by today's standards. Yeah. To go from kids' acts to senior acts. And it's very sad. Sullivan was amazing. Hollywood Palace was great. Sonny and Cher, Dean Martin.
Carol Burnett.
Carol Burnett, exactly.
Gary Moore before when she was on.
Very good, yeah. Gary Moore had a wonderful. That's where Carol Burnett got her start, by the way. And these wonderful variety shows, I just cannot see them. They tried something a few years ago to revive the Ed Sullivan Show with Howard Cosell hosting. And I forget the name of it.
That was a mistake right there.
And what a bomb. Yeah. What a bomb. It lasted weeks and right on the dumper.
Yeah, and there's a guy that a lot of people didn't give credit to, Ed Sullivan. A lot of people considered him like this talentless guy, but he really ran that show.
Oh, he ran that with an iron fist. He knew talent. And if somebody developed and became a big star, he had them on the show. People like Michael Jackson, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Elvis.
Yeah.
And Ed Sullivan was a great showman.
Yeah. And in fact, there's a story about the Doors when they were on there to sing Light My Fire. And he wanted them to change one of the lyrics about getting higher.
That's right.
They refused. Mm-hmm. They never appeared on that show again.
It was a one-shot deal. They agreed to follow Sullivan, and it was a live show, if you remember. And when they went on, they did what they wanted to do. They didn't change the word, and that was it.
Yeah.
Sullivan never used them again.
Never again, yeah. No, you obviously love what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. I'm very, very fortunate, Rich. I enjoy what I do, and I'm busy, and I'm all over, mostly New England and New York. So almost every night I'm home, which I enjoy.
Now, where are you from originally?
I'm a West Roxbury kid.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in Brookline, and the past several years lived in West Roxbury, which is centrally located to wherever I go.
Yeah,
that
sounds great.
Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire.
Now, do you find that the crowd is pretty mixed as far as ages, or do you?
Yeah. It really depends on the program. I find it interesting when I do my old-time radio show, it's mostly seniors, but occasionally there are young people who can't be reminiscing, because it was before their time. But for young people, I see this is a whole new bag. This is what it was like. In other words, the older people identify with it, they remember it. Younger people, it's kind of an introduction. And I do the same with the other shows. My big band show, I get mostly an adult crowd, but sometimes younger people that like good music.
Yeah. And again, you find more and more of them drawing upon.
Isn't it interesting?
I mean, here's a good example. Tony Bennett. I mean, is he bigger now than perhaps he's ever been?
Tony Bennett is amazing. He's either 81 or 82 years old, and he sounds terrific. And you know why, Rich? Because over the years, he's taken care of his voice. He's never smoked, never with booze, unlike a Dean Martin or a Sinatra that was always smoking and drinking, and their voice burnt out.
Sure.
You know, and they weren't the same as they got older. Tony Bennett can sing till he's 100.
Right, and he's, like I said, he's did an album not too long ago, duets with people like Bono and so on.
Isn't that interesting?
So he's drawing in a whole new crowd.
A whole younger crowd. In fact, he won the Grammy, I guess it was either last year or the year before for that album.
Yeah.
I'm an old Tony Bennett fan. I love him.
Oh, he is fabulous. There's no question about it. So what is your show like when you go around with...
Well, it varies. It varies. I do a show called Comedy and Music. I'm a humorist, a comedian who's very, very clean. And I interplay with the accordion, and I get the audience involved with singing. I'm a storyteller, very clean. I wouldn't work any other way. And I get a nice mixed audience for that show. And usually I get a pretty mixed audience for the nostalgia shows. The show that I've been having a lot of fun with lately is strictly Sinatra. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big... Are you a Sinatra fan?
You know, when you talk about it, I actually enjoy Sammy Davis and Dean Martin's.
The Rat Pack.
More than
Sinatra?
More than Sinatra,
well, they were both great.
They were great,
They
yeah.
were both
Sammy
great.
Davis, to me, is like the ultimate entertainer. Of
Probably
all
one of the
time.
greatest all-around talents in the history of
Right,
show
I mean,
business.
Singing, dancing, I mean...
Did it all. His impressions,
Yeah,
played many
both.
musical instruments. He was great.
Absolutely.
But I have two favorite all-time performers. One is Al Jolson, and the other one is Sinatra. My show, Strictly Sinatra, it starts with him as a teenager on the old Major Bowes radio show, Major Bowes' Original Amateur Hour, where he sang with the Hoboken Four. That was his beginning.
Right, yeah.
And then I do the history of Sinatra on radio, the Tommy Dorsey years. Then he kind of had a dip in his career, and then came back bigger and better and stronger than ever when he won the Academy Award for playing Maggio in the Eternity.
From Here to
Eternity, yeah. Exactly. And the rest, of course, is history.
Of course. And, of course, they claim that, of course, in the movie The Godfather, the Al Martino character was...
Well, Sinatra did not want Al Martino to play the role. And Martino says, listen, I don't have your bucks, because they paid him pretty well. And Martino did a very nice job.
Yes, yeah.
But Sinatra was totally against Al Martino playing the role. He was totally against the movie.
Is that right?
Yeah, because there's always been comments about having him. I'm not accusing. I'm just saying comments I've heard about, hanging out with some of the boys.
Yeah. Now, you also do announcing for wrestling.
Yes.
And I'm a wrestling fan. Not so much these days, but back in the late 60s, early 70s with Bruno Sammartino, Killer Kowalski, who I both met.
Yeah.
I know you've met Killer Kowalski,
yes.
Yeah. And so how did you get into doing the wrestling?
My dad was born in Russia. And when he came to this country, he didn't know anything about baseball or football or basketball. The only thing my dad took me to as a kid was professional wrestling. So I got to love it. And then I got friendly with Killer Kowalski through Abe Ford, who used to promote at the Boston Garden.
Yeah.
And we became very friendly, and the Killer started to promote wrestling when he retired. And I was his ring announcer. And now I do a lot of the independent shows. I'm the voice of Malden Access Cable, by the way, when it comes to professional wrestling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we do a lot of the independent shows, and it's just the love I've had since I was a kid.
Yeah. Now, does he still have his wrestling school? I believe he does.
No, he gave up. Richard Byrne took over the wrestling school.
Who was once one of the champions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, he just retired as a wrestler. Richard Byrne is a karate expert and a very fine wrestler. He was heavyweight champ. And he retired recently, but he runs a very successful wrestling school in Malden.
Right.
He teaches young up-and-coming wrestlers as well as people who are into the martial arts.
Well, it's about time that Killer retired. He deserves it. He's spent
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of years.
He's a great guy. In fact, he was
Yeah.
at the show last week. He comes and the people love him, and I always introduce him, and he says a few words, and he sells his 8x10 photos. And he's one of the all-time great. I'm with you. I love that era of Bruno and Killer and Chief J. Strongbow.
Right, I'll put them up against any of these guys.
It's
today.
totally changed.
It's totally changed. It
To
really
today,
is.
it's ridiculous what is happening. It's more showmanship nowadays than wrestling. But the old timers, 60s and 70s, they
Yeah.
were great.
Yeah,
Just
Professor
great.
Tanaka, all of those guys, yeah. So tonight, Golden Age of Rock and Roll. Have you met some of the performers? I know the Platters. Herb Reed is a local guy.
Herb Reed is,
Yeah.
there's a lot of Platters groups.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Which is a whole nother subject, right, about the phony groups and
It's
stuff.
it's very, very sad, but the original Platters, and this is one of the musicians of the Platters that told me this story, the offspring of the original Platters and the grandchildren of the original Platters, many of them started their own Platters groups, and there's different groups throughout the country. The best group, I think, is Herb Reed's Platters,
Yeah.
and he is the only living person in the original Platters.
That's right. Only original founding member. That's correct.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all the others are bogus groups.
Yeah, I met Herb Reed at Little Joe Cook's 80th birthday 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and wonderful man.
Herb is the best.
And again, so unless it says Herb Reed's Platters, I mean, you're being duped.
You're being duped.
And the same thing with the Drifters.
Yeah.
All these groups. Little Joe Cook just got through performing down in Mohegan Sun at Bowser. Remember Bowser?
Sure,
from
Sha-Na-Na.
He has
Yeah.
a doo-wop show he puts on.
Uh-huh.
And he's been a very big advocate fighting against these.
Well, so
these
is Herb
phony
Reed,
groups.
but
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, there's 3 ladies going around now called the Supremes. They don't even include Mary Wilson.
I mean, how can you,
You know,
do that? I mean, I know how it happens. The management owns the names, but I mean, what kills me is I didn't even get to see these groups when they were big because of my age,
Mm-hmm.
and so when I go and I see somebody performing as like even the Vogues, and they're younger than me,
Sure.
well, you know something's wrong.
Oh, yeah. You know what gets me? Bill Haley's Comets. Now, Bill Haley has been dead for many, many years, and none of the Comets are originals. This really gets me. A lot of the groups, nothing to do with the original members. It's very sad, but a lot of it does exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned about having some DVDs coming out soon or anything?
I'm going to come out. A lot of people are asking me about the DVDs, when I'm going to come out. So I've been talking to one company, and I may start with 1 or 2 shows, and people come over to me afterwards, say, where can I get this? Like the show I'm doing tonight, The Golden Days of Rock and Roll. There's nothing available that I sell, but there will be soon.
Yeah. And tell me about Simon Says.
I work the Catskill Mountains a lot in the summer. I'm kind of a Catskill kid, and I developed this morning show after breakfast where I get all the guests together, and I do a comedy version of Simon Says, where it's not only entertaining for the people who participate, but it's entertaining for the people who are watching. For example, you want to play Simon Says?
Well, I'll try.
All right. Rich, now you understand the rules. If Simon tells you to do it, you do it. If Simon does not tell you to do it, don't do it. Okay? Simon says wave. Okay. Simon says put your hand down. Okay. Simon says put your hand up. You understand now? Okay. Hands down. Simon says put your hands up. No, that's down, Rich. I said up. See, and it's just the kind of a play on words, and I have fun with the audience. It's a show I do called Trivia and Simon Says. Excuse me. The first part is playing trivia. I'm going to play some rock and roll trivia at the end of this show, and then I get them all involved with Simon Says. Just a fun time.
It is fun. And of course, you know, I failed on that miserably, of course, because the inclination was
Exactly.
you had it in your mind.
You anticipated me
Yeah.
saying one thing, and I do another.
Do another
and
thing, yeah.
that's so I get a lot of laughs with Simon Says.
Well, I'll tell you, it's been a lot of fun talking with you.
You were terrific.
And before I forget, you do have a website, melsimons.com.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If anybody wants to go on there and check his other appearances in the area for your other shows.
By all means.
Like I said, you've got about 5, 6, 7 different programs.
A lot of
that you
shows,
present.
and the stuff that's open to the public. The gal that does my, I don't own a computer, Rich, so I don't do my own website. Isn't that amazing? And Kim, the gal that does my website, puts stuff on of upcoming things that are open to the public. So I've got a whole bunch of stuff. So check it out,
Yep, and
melsimons.com.
there's also your books are on there and a little bio about you and stuff. Well, again, Mel Simons, thank you so much. And,
Thank you, Rich. I enjoyed it.
And good luck tonight at the Burlington Public Library, where
Thank
you'll
you.
be doing the Golden Days of Rock and Roll. And it's melsimons.com if you want to check out his website. You've been watching Turntable. I'm Richie Sarno. Thank you and good night.